In this video, we demonstrate all the basic functionality of the Market Mapper platform, which provides lawyers and businesses comprehensive insight into the market share and concentration effects of mergers between competitors for competition law and strategy purposes. We will begin with data requirements and upload, then demonstrate how the platform provides a comprehensive overview of competitive overlap and concentration. Then we'll dig deeper into individual markets, explore the optimal remedies required to address regulator concerns around the merger, and show how we make our analysis defensible with transparent documentation. So first, we upload our data. We're going to be looking at some fictionalized data that represents a hypothetical merger, and this is similar to what you would do if you had been retained by a client in order to advise them on a retail merger. So we have very basic location and revenue data, and we're going to upload that into the system and just identify how it's structured for the app to be able to geocode it. Here we can review to double check that the app correctly identified the structure of the data. To support the merger analysis, we'll identify the purchaser and the target, as well as any independent parties in the data, and then we'll geocode the data to have precise locations for the basis of geographically defined markets. We can see an overview of the parties in the data, the number of competitors of different affiliations, and we can also look at the locations on a map. So now we've uploaded our data and we're ready to move on to the competitive analysis. So let's start by getting an overview of the competitive overlap and combined market share in our merger. This fictionalized data captures the merger of retail gas stations on Vancouver Island, and like many retail industries, there's no clear guidance describing what the antitrust authority considers to be a relevant geographic market. Instead, there's a range of potential market definitions to consider, often 5 and 10 kilometer distance, 10 or 15 minutes drive time, or official geographic boundaries like census boundaries that capture different economic zones. And using this tab, we can assess the degree of competitive overlap between the parties under any of those market definitions. And we can do so for markets around either purchaser or target locations. We can do the analysis first for a market defined by a 10 kilometer distance, and we see immediately that there are 30 potential markets where the parties overlap. 13 of those overlapping markets have potential market shares or HHIs that exceed the regulatory thresholds. We can look at a filtered list of just the markets that have HHIs or post-merger market shares that exceed the regulatory thresholds, and we can see what these markets look like on a map. For now, this just helps us get a sense of the scope and distribution of the markets under this market definition, and down below we can save all of our analysis for later review or to be included in the report that we generate at the end of the process. So we can run the same analysis for hypothetical markets based on drive time instead of distance. So here we'll select 10 minutes, and we'll see how many overlaps there are between the parties with this market definition. We have 24 markets with competitive overlap and 18 flagged as potentially exceeding the regulatory thresholds. We can see details of those overlaps down below, and we can also see what these drive time catchments actually look like on the map. And this analysis is saved down below for further review. Lastly, we know that antitrust authorities often measure competition in retail industries using official boundaries like census boundaries, corresponding to metro areas and other geographic units. When we select census boundaries on this tab, it allows us to search for overlap between the merging parties in all potentially relevant census boundaries and identify any census boundaries where the merger raises competitive concern. So here it runs through all those thousands of census boundaries and identifies 7 where the parties overlap. And of those 7, we have 4 where the HHIs or shares potentially exceed the thresholds. And we can filter to show those. And we can also see all of the affected census boundaries on a map. Now, having seen some of the possible scenarios, we want to get a complete picture, and that's what we can do on the next tab. Here we select the entire range of potential market definitions implicated in the merger according to distance, drive time, or census boundary category. The market X-ray will flag all market definitions with potential threshold concerns so you can see the entire merger risk landscape at a glance. And the results are presented like this. Every row of the table corresponds to a party location in the dataset, and every column corresponds to a potential market definition. Cells are color-coded according to potential risk level, and we can hover on each cell to see details about the market definition, shares, and HHI. This can be a useful guide for investigating specific markets in greater detail in the next tab, and below the chart we have a summary of the overlapping markets and risk profile. Next, we're going to drill down into specific markets and in particular see how the different market definitions impact the competitive risks of the merger. So we're going to start with this location and analyze competition around a 10-kilometer distance radius. Below the map, we have details about the concentration in HHIs, as well as a competitive breakdown of the market. Now we can do the same thing for markets defined by drive time again. So we can select 15 minutes and map the 15-minute drive time catchment around this location. You can see that drive time catchments reflect the geography a lot differently than simple circular catchments. And below the map, we have our HHI, shares, and detailed market breakdown. So next, it can actually be useful to look at multiple catchments combined. So here we'll select a neighboring catchment from the other party, and we'll look at what the two 10-minute drive time catchments combined look like. This could be useful in industries where customer behavior suggests that these catchments should be combined into one relevant market. But we can do that easily here for any combination of markets and look at what that combined catchment looks like on a map, as well as have the detailed competition breakdown. And lastly, on this tab, we can investigate individual census boundaries. So we know the parties have overlap in the Victoria CMA, so we can look at that one as a test. So we select the Victoria CMA, and we can look at the market on the map, and we can also get the competitive breakdown. We can do this for any of the census districts identified as having party overlap. In the next tab, we're able to identify what divestitures, if any, are required to get below different regulatory thresholds in different scenarios that we've considered. So all of the different multi-market scenarios we've been looking at are available here, and we can look at one that we think is particularly plausible. So we'll look at the 10-minute drive time market definition. And this is going to identify the optimal remedy package that gets us below the share and HHI thresholds in all of these markets after the merger, but giving away as little value as possible. So depending on the standards that the competition authority uses to assess merger remedies, this can be a really helpful tool to assess the risks associated with a potential acquisition. So this module lets you identify the mathematically optimal divestiture, also accounting for crown jewels that should be protected from divestiture. And finally, we've got our settings and export tab. So here we can choose the country to which the app is configured. We can customize the regulatory thresholds. We can look at all the analysis that we've conducted, and we can select which analysis we want to include in the Excel report that we can generate. So here we're just going to select all of the multi-market and individual market analysis that we did, as well as the remedies. And in the report, we can also include appendices. So we can have a data appendix, which includes all of the geolocated data that was used to calculate market shares, as well as a detailed methodological appendix that shows the technical information underpinning the app's methodologies. And this is what the report looks like after it's been downloaded. So we have one tab just providing an overview of the analysis that we did. We have a tab detailing all the multi-market scenarios that we looked at. We have a tab looking at the individual markets in detail that we looked at. We have a tab reporting the remedies, the optimal remedies. We have the methodological appendix with the technical information. And we have the data appendix. And that's it. That's how easy it is to conduct a comprehensive merger analysis with defensible results that will stand up to regulatory and courtroom scrutiny. For more information or to book a demonstration, visit dexintelligence.ai or contact Justin at dexintelligence.ai.